I cannot believe I'm saying this. Has The View started to make sense? Well, I wouldn't be too quick to say that, but what happened this week is a curious change in tone against the Democrats with criticism that I believe is just a little too late. But that's just the start of it, because I need to show you the much bigger picture of the trouble that ABC News is in. Just take a look at this so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm kind of rethinking my thinking, and I do think that maybe it's time for the Democrats to do a little bit of this post-mortem, because the Democratic Party has always been the party of the working class, has always been. If you look at all the policies, they're for the people. And I think even myself, as someone who grew up in abject poverty from the Bronx, my parents lived paycheck to paycheck. They had to decide whether or not they were going to feed me or whether or not we were going to have heat. And I remember that. And I think I missed the boat in terms of realizing that there are so many Americans that still have that experience that I grew up with and that members of my family grew up with. And so I think we need to make space in this tent for the people that are really going to need it, because I got to tell you, I don't think the Republican Party is the party of the working class. I think they will hurt the working class. And so it is up to those of us who remember how that feels or who cares about that to reach out and say, come back, we can help you. And I intend myself, what little I can do, to try to do that more.
What a refreshingly somber tone from someone whose claim to fame after the election has become race hustling and gaslighting voters and people of color for abandoning the Democratic Party this time. And it kind of seems artificial, right? Almost a memory of the multiple hostage-like illegal notes that Sonny Austin has been forced to read by the producers in the last month. By the way, I'd love to see you as a part of these important conversations, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to always stay in the loop. Now, the truth is no such shift in tone happens by accident, because ABC News and Disney at large is in pretty big trouble, especially after a financial and reputational dent with the $15 million payout for the defamation lawsuit filed against Donald Trump against the network. Not just that, two of their primetime hosts that the network relies on, with David Muir and George Stephanopoulos, have both seen a decline in ratings, and guess what? Seeing as how willing Donald Trump is to take the media to court, The View understands that any next misstep they make on the show may not be easily swatted away with a hasty legal note. Not just that, you realize how hollow this pretense of criticism sounds at the Democratic Party when it was people like Sonny Austin herself who were shouting down criticisms of Joe Biden's declining mental faculties or Kamala Harris's unelected nomination to the top of the party ticket. Both of those two things ended up as a big component of why the Democrats lost the election. And then here we have her feigning some sort of sympathy for the working class when the inflation and illegal immigration crisis under the Joe Biden presidency has only squeezed life out of the working class. Throwing them breadcrumbs of sympathy and expecting them to come running back is not going to happen. At least not before they see reform in the party's structure and rhetoric.
Well, it is interesting because in the article he quotes, I forgot the exact quote, but he said something about how it's become the party of college professors and, it's this removed group of highly educated. And I think the conversations around that, because the people on the other side were voting for Donald Trump, oftentimes those voters were kind of put in a bucket of not being smart and spoken down to. So I think it's a strange thing because I don't even fully identify what the Democratic Party is anymore. It's not recognizable to me. And the right, the same can go. The fact that they're becoming an isolationist party when that we see so much going on in the world and we understand the ramifications of the chess game and all of that. But I do think what's most interesting is that Donald Trump supposedly reached the working class, but I don't grasp what parts are going to benefit them. So was being heard enough? Was it just being heard by a candidate? Because his plans don't break down to helping them.
She doesn't recognize the Democratic Party anymore? Can this panel agree on something? Is the party still for the working class like Sonny Austin said, or is it not? Here's the truth. There are two major reasons why we saw a significant exodus of the working class vote toward the Republican side. For one, the Democrats are not what they used to be. They are not the left that spoke for the oppressed, but have been captured by big money interest groups and an entrenched establishment, just like the Republican Party has been criticized for. And secondly, many of the policy solutions that we see from the Democrat agenda have failed to adapt to the new needs of the working class. More than just higher wages and a social safety net, they want social mobility and protection of their domestic jobs. They want global peace that keeps supply chains intact, and they want to have a chance to come out of being the working class their entire life. When it comes to that, Donald Trump's trade protectionist and more free market ideas sound more inviting than something we've already tried before. Then, when you add on the fact that only around 2 to 3% of the lawmakers in both of these major parties have actually risen from the working class, well, you realize where this deep disconnect is coming from. And it just comes across as hypocritical and opportunistic when you hear these ladies at The View switch their tones in an attempt to pacify the voter base after basically aiding in the loss of an election for a party that they had high hopes for. Alyssa Farah-Griffin said something half sane here, which is a welcome departure from the usual for the show, even if you question the motive for it.
I do think it was trade deals feeling like America's being taken advantage of, and it affects the jobs that are largely working class and more industrial based, agriculture driven. And it was the border. It's not because they're like, oh, I'm nervous that somebody's going to come take my job. It's they know that big corporations take advantage of cheap labor, and those people are going to get employed while they're struggling to make ends meet. And I just want to say one thing, because Fetterman said something so interesting on the show we never discussed. I've used the term, Donald Trump's a convicted felon. I can't support that. But I think a lot of this country feels like we put people in a box if they're a convicted felon, even if they served their time, they paid their debt to society, and we think
got to be gone now.
and we think that they shouldn't be able to get ahead. And I actually think that backfired for Democrats.
Yeah.
I think
I
didn't like the name calling.
I am not a college graduate. I am not that person. I've never forgotten where I came from, and I believe that all these things that people said, oh, I want my groceries, I want to take care of. I am going to sit and wait and see how he takes care of groceries. I want to see how he takes care of our health care. Not just our health care, but if you hire somebody who says these inoculations are wrong, you're not going to Europe. You're not traveling anywhere because no one will invite us to their country because they don't want us bringing stuff in there. So I want to see. I know people had big high hopes and thought he was going to be the thing. And okay, you don't think that the Democrat, I am neither. There's no party for me.
Precisely. People aren't just buying the same old narratives anymore because their very trust in the system has been eroded whether you like it or not. That's why the constant phrase convicted felon does little to move the needle for the Republican voter base, and that says more about the trust they have in the institutions and the media rather than them as voters. And it's not like that lack of trust is made in better when we've seen The View, including the left more broadly, basically gaslight and excuse the election loss each time after Trump, either to things like racism and misogyny or some kind of foreign collusion that could never be proven.
Apparently there's new tech startup platform that tells you the political affiliations of your potential new neighbors. Well, I guess some real estate professionals believe that this could influence buyers more than the conditions of the home. Oh. And I think that is not a good idea because number one, it's none of your business. And number two, it just fosters more division.
Yes. And to pretend that our divisions are just political is the best part because jerks come in every political affiliation.
Yes, they do.
And that's what neighbors are.
Well, that's what you got to ask people. How much of a jerk is this guy?
Yeah. Now, I'm sure you're surprised at this as well, considering this is the same panel that was echoing the sentiment not long ago that you can choose not to speak to your own family members if they don't share the same politics or social worldview as you do. But for better or for worse, this was an interesting change of tone for a panel that is often just a parody of itself. However, let me know in the comments what you thought about this, because it's still hard to give them credit for something if we're not sure it's coming from the right place.